The Law of Gravitation from the Feynman Messenger Lectures. The Feynman Messenger series originates from Richard Feynman's celebrated lectures at Cornell University, where he delivered these groundbreaking talks during his tenure as a professor. At Cornell, Feynman captivated audiences by breaking down complex topics in physics with clarity and charisma, making the scientific principles accessible to all. These lectures would later become iconic, showcasing his unique teaching style and love for exploring the mysteries of the universe. The series remains a lasting testament to his time at Cornell, inspiring generations of learners to approach science with curiosity and wonder. In the Law of Gravitation lecture, Feynman delves into the universal force that governs the motion of planets, stars, and galaxies, gravity. He explores Newton's revolutionary idea that all objects with mass attract each other, explaining how this invisible force not only keeps us anchored to Earth, but also guides the planets in their orbits. With characteristic wit and clarity, Feynman unpacks how the law of gravitation shapes the universe on every scale, from the tiniest particles to the vast expanses of space. This is the transcript from the Richard Feynman Messenger lecture titled The Law of Gravitation. Introduction by Provost Dale R. Corson. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to introduce the Messenger lecturer, Professor Richard P. Feynman of the California Institute of Technology. Professor Feynman is a distinguished theoretical physicist, and he's done much to bring order out of the confusion which has marked much of the spectacular development in physics during the post-war period. Among his honors and awards, I will mention only the Albert Einstein Award in 1954. This is an award which is made every third year and which includes a gold medal and a substantial sum of money. Professor Feynman did his undergraduate work at MIT and his graduate work at Princeton. He worked on the Manhattan Project at Princeton and later at Los Alamos. He was appointed an assistant professor here at Cornell in 1944, although he did not assume residence until the end of the war. I thought it might be interesting to see what was said about him when he was appointed at Cornell, so I searched the minutes of our Board of Trustees, and there's absolutely no record of his appointment. There are, however, some 20 references to leaves of absence, salary, and promotions. One reference interested me especially. On July 31, 1945, the chairman of the physics department wrote the dean of the Arts College stating that Dr. Feynman is an outstanding teacher and investigator, the equal of whom develops infrequently. The chairman suggested that an annual salary of $3,000 was a bit too low for a distinguished faculty member, and recommended that Professor Feynman's salary be increased to $900. The dean, in an act of unusual generosity and with complete disregard for the solvency of the university, crossed out the $900 and made it an even $1,000. You can see that we thought highly of Professor Feynman, even then. Feynman took up residence here at the end of 1945 and spent 5 highly productive years on our faculty. He left Cornell in 1950 and went to Caltech, where he has been ever since. Before I let him talk, I want to tell you just a little bit more about him. 3 or 4 years ago, he started teaching a beginning physics course at Caltech, and the result has added a new dimension to his fame. His lectures are now published in 2 volumes, and they represent a refreshing approach to the subject. In the preface of the published lectures, there's a picture of Feynman performing happily on the bongo drums. My Caltech friends tell me that he sometimes drops in on the Los Angeles night spots and takes over the work of the drummer, but Professor Feynman tells me that that's not so. Another of his specialties is safecracking. One legend says that he once opened a locked safe in a secret establishment, removed a secret document, and left a note saying, "Guess who?" I could tell you about the time that he learned Spanish before he went to give a series of lectures in Brazil, but I won't. This gives you enough background, I think. So let me say that I'm delighted to welcome Professor Feynman back to Cornell. His general topic is the nature of physical law, and his topic for tonight is the law of gravitation. An example of physical law. Professor Feynman. The law of gravitation. An example of physical law. It's odd, but in the infrequent occasions when I've been called upon in a formal place to play the bongo drums, the introducer never seems to find it necessary to mention that I also do theoretical physics. I believe that's probably that we respect the arts more than the sciences. The artists of the Renaissance said that man's main concern should be for man, and yet there are some other things of interest in the world. Even the artist appreciates sunsets and the ocean waves and the march of the stars across the heavens, and there is some reason then to talk of other things sometimes. As we look into these things, we get an aesthetic pleasure from them directly on observation, but there's also a rhythm and a pattern between the phenomena of nature, which isn't apparent to the eye but only to the eye of analysis, and it's these rhythms and patterns which we call physical laws. What I want to talk about in this series of lectures is the general characteristics of these physical laws. That's even another level, if you will, of higher generality over the laws themselves. And it's really, all I'm talking about is nature as seen as a result of detailed analysis. But only the most overall general qualities of nature is what I mainly wish to speak about. Now, such a topic has a tendency to become too philosophical because it becomes so general that a person talks in such generalities that everybody can understand him, and it's considered to be some deep philosophy, if you will. However, I would like to be rather more special, and I would like to be understood in an honest way rather than in a vague way to some extent. And so if you don't mind, I'm going to try to give, instead of only generalities in this first lecture, an example of physical law, so that you have at least one example of the things about which I am speaking generally. In this way, I can use this example again and again to give an instance to make a reality out of something which would otherwise be too abstract. Now, I've chosen for my special example of physical law to tell you about the theory of gravitation, or the phenomena of gravity. Why I chose gravity, I don't know. Whatever I chose, you would have asked the same question. Actually, it was one of the first great laws to be discovered, and it has an interesting history. You might say, yes, but then it's old hat. I would like to hear something about more modern science. More recent perhaps, but not more modern. Modern science is exactly in the same tradition as the discoveries of the law of gravitation. It is only more recent discoveries that we would be talking about. And so I do not feel at all bad about telling you of the law of gravitation because I am, in describing its history and the methods, the character of its discovery and its quality, talking about modern science, completely modern. This law has been called the greatest generalization achieved by the human mind. And you can get already from my introduction that I'm interested not so much in the human mind as in the marvel of nature, who can obey such an elegant and simple law as this law of gravitation. So our main concentration will not be on how clever we are to have found it all out, but on how clever she is to pay attention to it. Now, what is this law of gravitation that we're going to talk about? The law is that two bodies, or bodies, exert a force